and good evening, friends and brethren. Welcome to the presentation number 12 of the Mystery Babylon. The Mystery Babylon, this woman is the Mystery Babylon, and she apparently is a city. The woman as a city is a motif that is presented throughout the Bible. City versus a woman and a woman versus a city. It's a close binding of two concepts together. And then when we come to Babylon, Babylon also happens to be a city. So both Babylon and the woman are merged in this mysterious mystery Babylon. So we have double justification or double case for a city. So that's the reason we are studying city or cities as foundation to understand this woman, the mystery Babylon. She has blood in her blood of saints and martyrs. So she's a killer woman, and she's also a harlot or a prostitute, not physical but spiritual. The spiritual prostitution is understood primarily as idolatry. So she is known for her idolatry and then false religion, which is in the cup, which is abominations that she will spread throughout the world. Both the kings of the earth as well as the inhabitants of earth, all the people will drink from her cup. So, and of course, whoever drinks her wine and part of her, God would bring plagues and bring judgment and destruction. So, people of God, Christians everywhere, are commanded and asked by God to come out of her, my people. If we consider as my people of God, then we should discern, we should understand this system represented by this woman riding the beast and try our best to understand and discern. And the most important thing is separation. Come out of her and be separate. Because if you partake of her sins by staying with her, you will also partake of the plagues and judgments that God would bring in her. So, why are we studying Mystery Babylon? To avoid her, to detect and to recognize and reject her, and stay away from this killer woman. And this is an idolatrous woman. It's a spiritual idolatry. And then we learn so many other aspects when we come to Revelation 17 and 18. And the first city was built by Cain, and second builder, the next builder is Nimrod. Nimrod builds several cities. In the last presentation, we learned about the land Shinar. Nimrod goes and settles himself in land of Shinar. Shinar is a land known for its thievery and plunder. It's like for piracy. It's a land similar to a jungle. It operates by law of jungle. What is law of jungle? I mean, the law of jungle is might is right. If you have power, you can do whatever you want. If you have power, all your actions are right. If don't have power, you are a weaker entity or a weaker city or a weaker country, then then you are not right in this sense. In the law of jungle, the fittest would survive, and the most powerful entities would grab everything that they want from you. All your resources they will grab, Last time we saw the king of Shinar actually comes and takes away Lot and his woman and his animals with bunch of other surrounding cities. It's a plundering land which uh, king of Shinar, interestingly, does that. So we have very early in Bible, we have these examples and the case studies and scenarios that God presents, this law of jungle. So law of jungle also necessitates, uh, if everybody is living after the flood and settle themselves into small groups, and we call them villages, and they either raise crops or they tend animals, grazing animals, uh, goat, sheep, and oxen, and whatever they are primarily agricultural, rural people. So everybody settles down as rural people, and everybody is at same technological level, and everybody is dependent on God. So they are deeply aware on the countryside in that agricultural village setting. They need rain, they need crops, they need grass for animals, they need divine protection from locusts, from other predatory agencies like you have hail and you have disruption of agencies of weather, and then you have pests, and lots of things can go wrong. And you need good weather, good sunshine. If it is cloudy all the time, you cannot raise crops, and the lightnings and thunders can kill your animals which are grazing in open. So there are so many dangers every day the people have to face, and there is a direct relationship with God that they need. So there's a dependency of God for man, and that is deeply realized, and deeply people are aware of that need and dependence, need for dependence on God. But when these people, these men like Cain and Nimrod, when they build cities, something dramatic happens. The city is shielded in an artificial way, the dependence on God. City builds its walls, and city thinks or deceives themselves or lie to themselves that they no longer need God. They are not vulnerable because they get their grain, agricultural produce from several cities, yeah, several villages. If one group of villages uh, face famine or face other calamities of nature, they can always import from other villages, from other regions. So in their own mind, the city dwellers think that they are less dependent on God, and they are not directly face the 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 unsecure insecurities of living in agricultural domain. So they think that they are independent, that they are less dependent on God, and they also have storage of food for several years sometimes, and they are also secure. In the villages on the countryside, you do not know when an invader would come. So either predatory animals can come and attack them, or the other human invaders can also come potentially and attack. So they are more aware of God's protection. But here, cities are built with huge walls around them, and they are more secure. So the concept of city, when Nimrod builds the city, something significant is happening. It is declaring independence from God, God's protection, God's provision, and They would be independent of God. In fact, the whole trigger that starts this city building is a curse that is received from God. So Cain was cursed, and his response was to beget children and to build city. And the Nimrod was also cursed in that line, and his response was to build not one city, but multiple cities. And city is an answer to a curse from God, and it is also an answer from man that he would take care of himself and he doesn't need God. So he, as a response to God's curse, as well as a rebellion and revolt against holy, righteous, all giving God, all gracious God, he rejects him and he builds his own civilization and city. So that is the background, that is the context. So he settles in uh, Shinar, which is again operates by rules of jungle, laws of jungle. He grabs other small villages, their resources, and their men and women. He would enslave them and he would plunder their wealth and food and brings them to his own village. And his village now has more resources, more slaves, and then he turns his village into a city. That is how he begins the cities in Shinar. Shinar is a land where he settles and from where he wages his conquests, his war against all the small villages, and he plunders them and brings that to his city, and city grows in size and grows in its wealth and accumulation, and then he justifies it because after all, he has power. But in order to increase his power, he has to resort to certain certain new methodologies. First is technology. He needs technology. So if every village is equally strong compared to himself, it's very difficult to conquer them. So he needs a technology where he can overtake them and conquer them and crush them. That is the first important need for empire building or city building. Second aspect is organization of men or massive army needs to be raised. It's a sheer brute force. So the human army organization he seems to develop in order to conquer, and also he he builds tools or weaponry. And tools and weaponry is also an important aspect of cities. So the cities would develop tools, maybe an arrow, maybe something very primitive they begin with, and then they innovate. They grow in the tools, and the tools become more sophisticated, and then they also, as the science and technology evolves in these cities, they build a tool that would produce tools. So it's another level of advancement. So manually, you don't need to to create a tool or create a weapon individually. So they develop other machinery, other means, so they can mass produce this weaponry. So you have invention going progressing by leaps and bounds, and that's where we begin to see huge empires that evolved, and they're independent and sovereign, and these empires always cast their eye on helpless small cities. So there's a competition between the bigger cities and smaller cities, and also there is a competition between bigger cities and the villages, unwalled villages. So Nimrod goes and settles in this wicked land called Shinar, and he builds cities. Today, I want to go through three cities that he builds: Resen, Calneh, and Calneh and Calah. These are obscure cities, but uh, try to make a case for these cities. And Nimrod also builds other cities, which are major cities, which are Nineveh and Babylon. Babylon is a Hebrew word. It's the same word for Babel and Babylon. So we cover both under Nimrod. So Nimrod believed to have built Assyria, whole Assyria, and its capital city is Nineveh, as well as the Babel and Babylon. So the mighty city of Babylon, the wonder of the ancient world. So that also is ascribed to Nimrod by scriptures, by word of God. So that's what we studied last time, that it is not actually the physical man Nimrod that built so many cities which spanned across several generations. So the physical man Nimrod could not have lived that long to build so many cities. So the word Nimrod then refers not only the physical man, but the demon spirit that is moving him or animating him. It is not just one demon spirit, it's a group of demon spirits, highly organized and highly sophisticated, and a junta or group of demon spirits are also called Nimrod. So the Nimrod outlives the physical man Nimrod, as the demons would continue their work of building cities. So God eventually curses cities and brings judgment over cities. An interesting pattern we will see, that God would judge a city, but not its inhabitants. So what does it mean? He's judging and condemning the demonic group that is moving a city. Excuse me. But the inhabitants, the physical men and women in that city, God still is extending his gracious hand for them to repent and come to him. So there is an open-ended grace for men and women even in these wicked cities that Nimrod would build. But the demon spirits have no recourse, because they are the real culprits, the real evil, colossal evil that uh, they they are bent on and moving and shaping these men and women to build these cities in total revolt and total rebellion against Almighty God. So, with that introduction, let's start the presentation. So Nimrod, the next builder, city builder, and part three, and Resen, Calneh, and Calah, and then we will come to the beast, and we will touch upon Genesis 10, where all these cities are mentioned, and we will also go to Amos 5, 6, because Calneh would come, would resurface in uh, Amos writings, chapter 5 and 6, portion of 5 and portion of 6. And Calah and Amos 5 and 6, those chapters are quoted in Acts 7 by Stephen. It's an interesting thing. We will also briefly touch upon Acts 7. And then the third city, Calah, is also mentioned not in a direct way, it is in an indirect way in Second Kings. We will also briefly visit there. So first we will focus on this city called Resen. Resen is called Great City by scriptures. So we have standard diagram, the harlot woman and Babylon, they are fused together, and it is called the mystery. Great harlot Great Babylon. She rides the beast, she sits on it. She rides on many waters, sits on them, and she also sits on seven hills. So it's a highly figurative language God uses to describe us, a system, and we must understand system and stay away from that. So sometimes we learn things to stay away, but other times we learn things of God to embrace Him. So this is definitely thing to avoid, thing to stay away and maintain strict separation until we breathe last. So Babylon is a city, and the woman which you saw is that great city. So Babylon is called that great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth. She reigns over all the kings of the earth. That's an interesting statement. And then the great city, when Babylon was judged by God, that city, great city, was divided into three parts. And when Babylon fell, all the cities of the nations also fell. And the great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. So all the cities, even though they are independent and they are moved and shaped by independent groups of demon spirits, but all the demon spirits somehow in the realm of spirit, they are connected to each other under the leadership of Satan, the devil. So when when this Babylon falls, all the cities, all the demon spirits also would fall. So we'll come to these verses towards the end of this series, but nevertheless, Babylon is a city. So Genesis 10, cities of Nimrod, we will start, and verse 8, Genesis 10, and Cush begot Nimrod and began to be a mighty one in the earth. He began to be a mighty one on earth. So Nimrod was already introduced as a mighty one, and he was a mighty hunter side before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty side before the Lord. So we went through the alternate translation of the side. It is less likely that he is a hunter. It is more like a plunderer. Verse 10, in the beginning of his kingdom, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh. By the way, Calneh means fortress in the land of Shinar. You can see all these cities he's building in the land of Shinar. So Babel we will come subsequent presentations, and Calneh definitely I want to explained today. And out of that land went forth. So first he builds these cities, then out of that land came forth more cities. He went forth, that went forth, Ashur, that's another word for Assyria, and built Nineveh. Nineveh is capital of Assyria, which is also attributed to Nimrod, and the city Rehoboth and Calah, and Calah is Strong's number 3625, and Resen. Resen is bridle or bit between Nineveh and Calah. The same is great city. So Risen, we know very little about it, and it is between Nineveh and Calah. So Nineveh is a mighty big city, and Calah also has an interesting connotations. Between Calah and Nineveh, two big cities, this small city, Resen, uh, is located. And but instead of choosing Nineveh or Calah, God selects Resen as the great city. Great city, not in a positive sense, it is a negative connotation. It's a It's a bad, great city. You can say that. So the reason has something to do with very little. When we have very little information about a word or a city, we normally, this is almost every Bible teacher and student does. We go etymologically. We get the meaning of the word and try to understand and try to discern why this city is a great city. So the word is the meaning of risen is bridle or bit. So when God says bridle or a bit, we should step back and think where the bridle is used or bit is used. It is used for the horse to control a horse. So God does not give everything, every detail, as he would explain things to a 5-year-old. 5-year-old needs every detail, but we are grown up adults and we are now more familiar with the Word of God, the way He writes things. A small hint is sufficient for us to take that hint and build the concept. And while we are building this concept, we also cross reference or cross check with other concepts God already clearly told us. So we make sure this concept we are building from this one small hint that is actually in sync, in agreement with other concepts. So this is the work we are expected to do, and we can do that. The bridle and bit doesn't make sense. The bridle and bit should bring our thoughts to the horse and how horse is used to conquest, to conquer, and to build a city. That's where we begin to see the Resen as a great city. That is the foundation of the technological innovations and the, to harness the forces of nature to promote this plunder and getting the wealth of others and building your own city or country or your own place. So that's where we are going. First, we will talk about Resen and then we will go to other two cities. Resen, Resen, the great city, meaning bridle or bit. Where is its significance here? How do we understand? Just bridle or bit. It's more than that. We must not forget that the horse was the first force of nature domesticated by man and was put in his service. Initially, horse was put domesticated to plow the fields and for agricultural purposes, and we have horse and buggy to transport the grain. But parallelly, the horse was also used as a war machine. So they have to select the right breeds where they can use horse as for the military purposes. And you have to find men who can train the horse and train its rider, and then we have horse moving as a part of the advanced military moving towards its to be conquered cities or villages. So the horse is a very effective and very powerful because of its speed. And then horse's usefulness is further enhanced when you club 2 or 3 horses and put a chariot behind it. That's what Egyptians did and became a mighty empire. So chariots and horses. So the bride bridle or bit, from there we are constructing the horse as used for military purposes by Nimrod. By Nimrod. Remember that the cavalry is the horse-based military. Remember that cavalry was one of the most fearsome of the weapons, and the horse represented power and was a symbol of advanced civilization or city. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Ben-Hur. What they do is when they have chariot wheels, they put sharp uh, knife-like projections towards the center of the wheels, outwards. So these sharp objects that were fitted to the wheels of a chariot, they will try to put a dent on the other chariots that are riding along with that in a race, or they are used against the unarmed civilians. These chariot sharp objects, they will just they plow through the mass of people, and they will cut and rip the people, and their flesh would be torn to pieces. They fly all over, and the blood gushes out from these people that are killed. That is to terrorize the people. That technique was used by Assyrians. They perfected that. When the Assyrian chariots would come with the lightning speed of horses, people were terrified. Israelites would cry loud to their God once they see these Assyrian chariots. Assyrian chariots also fitted with some mirror-like surfaces on the wheels, and they also shine, and that that would terrorize unarmed civilians, and they run these chariots on top of people who are probably fleeing, and they will rip open their bodies and tear them to pieces, and the pieces and blood would fly all over, and then very little resistance is offered by the people. They surrender completely. They are willing to be sold themselves as slaves. So the horse can bring in such a gruesome uh, cruelty and 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 subjugation and conquest and crushing of the weaker and smaller places. This is how Nimrod built his cities. Thus, the name Resen takes on the meaning of an extraordinary reminder of the noblest conquest made by man. See, here, when these people invade the other smaller, weaker countries, they always justify their actions. And their conquest, they call themselves a noble conquest. Of course, that's a lying, that's a deceit. And they think that sometimes they present as if we found a, a bad leader, a bad mayor of that village who is supposedly harassing the villagers. So we are going there to get rid of that bad guy and help that village. So when you concoct that kind of lie, your army are more convinced. All your people in your city are now fully with you because you are doing a good cause, a noble conquest that you are doing. But in reality, it is not. It is not. So you would go and crush that leader, supposedly bad leader. It's doubtful if that leader is really bad or not. And then you plunder those cities, and that information is mostly suppressed. But the soldiers get their booty, and Nimrod would get bulk of the share of that. We saw that in the King of Shinar when he goes and attacks Sodom and Gomorrah in neighboring cities. He takes lots wealth, lots women, and lots animals. See how the plunder takes place. And the horse actually is very ancient uh, invention to use that as a military force. But but that does not stop from there. They need more technology, more signs, and they need more power so that they can go in a rapid way and decimate the enemy countries or enemy cities. So the whole efforts are spent for the speed and for the amount of destruction. When the nuclear weapons are invented, enormous amount of casualties and larger destructions. That's why they are called weapons of mass destruction, so that you can take down lots of people. Otherwise, you can't conquer. But the horse also brings in an element of speed, so they conquer speed. People who do not have horses or that kind of horses uh, and horse riders, they're at a disadvantage because the bigger cities of Nimrod have horse, and especially Resen. Resen has these horses, fast moving horses, as a lightning speed, which cannot be stopped. So speed is a big factor in military conquests and the victories that it brings. So from there, even in the modern times, today news, whoever has speed in its weaponry would seem to win the war. Either they are missiles, drones, and always the speed is a big factor. Even when Germans invented their aircrafts, their fighter jets, they were so swift, and they are like lightning. So that brought them several victories initially in the Second World War. So the speed of the forces, the speed at which armies would move, and speed at which the attack is carried out, so that makes big difference. From the use of horse for utilitarian purposes to the use of electricity, that is another invention, and there is a difference of science or technology, and also difference in quantity. So as the cities and the civilizations progress, we see from horse to other advances in technology, and the abilities are multiplied and the quantity is also multiplied. How many people you can kill simultaneously, how many miles you can travel faster in a day, all those things, quantity is multiplied, technology and science multiplied. But something has not changed from those days of Resen to present day. What is not changed is the spirit and will. The spirit, the demon spirits are same spirits moving and driving, and the will is to subjugate, to conquer others. And and this is this has started right in Shinar, and it is continuing even today. If we step back, what God is saying is, has God anything to say in this state of affairs? God says, if you find a stranger from another village, a person who is journeying from another village, take him inside your home, love him, and treat him well. And even today in the Middle Eastern countries, when a stranger or a guest comes to their home, they treat him so well, they think that they are treating God. Even in the scriptures, there is a verse that says, sometimes the strangers are entertained, even God's angels were entertained without knowing. It's a highly commendable thing to love your neighboring villages, love your neighbor equal to yourself. If a stranger is from other cities, other villages, entertain them, provide them shelter, provide them food, provide them comfort, and welcome them. And if other foreigners would come and settle in your land, and what God says, there will be one law for you and a stranger, and he should not be discriminated. If you harass him and if he cries out to me, I will hear. That's the thunderous voice from God that resonated across the cities of Israel. Why? God said, because you were also strangers in the land of Egypt. You knew how the exploitation and the slavery would work. And never forget that you are strangers. Learn to treat your strangers fairly, equally, and justly, and extend your help, extend, share good things with a stranger and with a neighbor. So that's how God thinks. Everybody has to love each other, learn from each other. They might have developed a new recipe. Hey, what's that? Share with us, or you have a new recipe. It's all good, beautiful times god God would envision for mankind, but Nimrod opposes everything and he destroys everything. And in fact, he wants God's judgment by his actions. So the spirit and will has not changed from Shinar to today's world. The bridle and the bit, the first means invented by man to subdue natural force. If you want to run and fight with other villages, you have equal strength because they are also like men like you, and they also have natural strength. But you want to have extra natural strength, you need a horse, bridle and bit. That's how you overtake and crush the other cities. Resen is doubtlessly not the great city of history in any genuine sense, but she is the great city in the sense that she represents the human power glorified in her. So the human power to develop technologies, to organize men and women, and to develop strategies, the military strategies, and to conquest and to conquer, to crush and to plunder and loot all their resources and bring it back into your city so that your city grows bigger and its walls are raised and you become wealthy. You are filled with all the comforts and you have slaves gotten from that others places that you have conquered. So the city is inextricably tied up with the conquest. The conquest builds the city, and the city, once it grows, it demands more conquests. So this is how one is related to other. And also, she is the city of technique, of invention, and dominance over nature. So the natural limitations would prevent you from from doing this extraordinary conquests and crushing of other nations. So you need to overpower the nature, your natural limitations, by means of technique and invention. So you have tools, technologies, all these things were deliberately invested in so that you can do more wars, more conquests, and build yourself. In fact, for Israel, God has a different commands. The king in Israel should not multiply horses. No, no, you can't. In fact, you have to read my law once through in every year from cover to cover. King has to make a copy personally with his hand, and so that you remember God's instructions. You remember what God is asking you to do, so that you are within your senses. You would not become a Nimrod because every man has a potential to become Nimrod. So she is the city of technique, invention, dominance, and multiplication of horses. Of course, Solomon disobeyed God and he multiplied horses, and we find he is the beginning of the downfall of Israel. That's reason. Let's quickly do Calneh. Calneh is another city. Calneh is used, it's also a cruel, crushing city. God uses this city to punish his own people. There's a saying by one Bible teacher. He said, the whole reason for Babylon and Assyria, these mighty Gentile nations and mighty cities, the sole reason for their existence is to bring judgment on God's people when they are disobedient, when they are not in line with God. So that's a thought. That's somebody's conclusion, and sometimes is I am convinced in some scenarios. I wonder why that much power should be given to Babylon or Resen or Calneh. Calneh, we see this guy pops up uh, where God's people were crushed and enslaved and taken to this Calneh. So let's see where the history of these cities uh, does not belie their names. So their names indicate lots of their nature and character. They show reign of man given over to his sin, to his idols. They are the place where the chosen of God are held captive. So now God is also bringing his people, his covenanted people, are chosen of God, are somehow at disadvantage with these cities. We see this more. Remember that the cavalry was one of the most fearsome of the weapons. The horse represented power and was a symbol of advanced civilization. And Calneh, whose power is terrible, is placed there as a warning to Zion. So, Zion are covenanted people of God. Watch and pray, for temptation is coming. That's what Jesus said. So the temptation can also be translated as a trial, as a distress that is coming. Watch and pray. Otherwise, distress is coming. So the distress is coming on Zion. We, as true church or true Christians, the warning is the trial temptation is coming. Where do you think the temptation or trial is coming? From Babylon. And representative of Babylon is Calneh. Calneh, the reign of violence, ready to pounce upon Jerusalem because Jerusalem is asleep in her delusive peace. This is Amos 5 and 6. We have the occurrence of this city, Calneh, where people or God's people were taken as slaves and they were taken to Calneh. She is only one city among the others. She is not a symbol of the city, but she has a mission among the cities, that of being a place for the deportation of the church. So the church in ancient times, the Israel, or modern times, the spiritual Israel, which we, the true Christians, are. So I want to briefly go through Amos 5 and 6, how God describes the judgment on northern 10 tribes of Israel. When Assyrian army comes and invades northern 10 tribes, they take them away and they kill bunch of them and they enslave them and take them to Calneh. So God describes us the whole scenario, why he is doing that, and how Calneh comes into this picture in this scenario of God's people being judged. Amos 5. Amos 5 verse 23 we will start. We will start. Take you away from me the noise of your songs. This is God talking to Israel. For I will not hear the melody of your viols. Their heart is not right with God. They're singing songs. They're using beautiful musical instruments. We see that in many mega churches. They have beautiful choirs. They sing songs. But if their heart is not right with God, this is what God is saying in Amos 5. Take away, take away this is noise. to my ears. It is not music to my ears. But let judgment run down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. You are neglecting basic tenets of my righteousness, justice and righteousness. You are neglecting those things, but singing songs of praise to me. That is noise to me. Take away. See the language of God towards Israel. You offered unto me sacrifices and offerings in the wilderness 40 years, O house of Israel? So all your sacrifices, all your doings, are they directed unto me? Obviously, answer is no. But you have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch. This is a pagan god, and Kiyun, your images, and the star of your God, which ye made to yourselves. For physical Israelites, these are physical idols, and the idols of pagan nations around them. But for us, the spiritual idols, that would 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 jeopardize our relationship with God. With compromised relationship with God, whatever sacrifices and offerings that we do, then they are rejected by God. Even our singing of hymns is noise to him. Therefore, I will cause you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, said the Lord, whose name is the God of hosts. So God is declaring, beyond Damascus, the Assyrians would come and take you out. And Stephen, the first martyr, Christian martyr, refers to these passages and he gives us extra insight into why God brings Calneh to judge uh, the people of God. Acts 7, verse 41, and they made calf, that is golden calf in those days, and offered sacrifices unto the idol, and rejoiced in the work of their own hands, their own hands. Then God turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets, O you house of Israel, have you offered to me slain beasts and sacrifices by the space of 40 years in the wilderness? This is verse 25 from Amos that he's quoting. So, because they turned their back to God, God is doing something. He's sending a delusion on them so that they worship the host of heaven. So, if you harden your heart and turn your back to God, would make your state worse. He pushes you away from Him so that He can bring judgment. But if you are softening your heart and seeking God with tears and repentance and earnestly on your knees, then God would pull you towards Him. See how God works with His people. Depending on your approach, your attitude, either He can push you away into delusions or pull you into Himself, forgiving your sins, covering with His grace and blood. And this is how God works. Verse 43, yea, you took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan, figures which ye made to worship them. I will carry you away beyond Babylon. Here it says beyond Damascus. It's same. It's a synonymous. Babylon, Shinar, Damascus, Assyria. They're all in the same region of Shinar. So Stephen paraphrases it, and God God declared that you guys are being enslaved and taken away to Babylon and beyond. This is how God operates. Because they took the tabernacle of Moloch and star of your God Remphaim, that is for them, physical Israel. For us, the doctrinal compromise. Are we listening to Jesus Christ's teachings alone, Or are we getting some goofy guy and start following his teachings? Teaching is one way we all go astray, and God would bring judgments. Acts 7:57, and they cried out with loud voice when Stephen was describing them of his generation, the Judeans, the Pharisees and Sadducees, and comparing them with the northern 10 tribes of Israel before the Assyrian invasion. They understood and they were filled with fury. Instead of repenting, they tried to uh, kill uh, Stephen, and the crowd cried out with a loud voice, stopped their ears, ran upon him with one accord, and cast him out of the city and stoned him. And the witness laid down their clothes at a young man's feet, whose name was Saul, who later became Paul. But I want you to notice one thing. When Stephen was martyred, they cast him out of their city, the city, and stoned him. So these evil men and women, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they are also in a city, and they put Stephen out of the city and killed him, just like Jesus was put out of the city. So the city would reject God and God's faithful people. That's why God's people are held captive in these Babylonian type cities. Now we're back to Amos. We'll continue story in Amos 6, verse 1. Woe to them that are at ease in Zion and trust in the mountain of Samaria, which are named chief of the nations, to whom the house of Israel came. So they're easygoing, like in church, easy Christians, and they have easy Jesus. Easy Jesus is most dangerous Jesus. You need a difficult Jesus because Jesus said, I am the way, but the easy way would lead to destruction. Easy Jesus. But the difficult Jesus, that is me, the real Jesus, is a difficult Jesus and narrow Jesus that leads to life. But here they're easygoing. They follow the doctrines and teachings of men, some rules, do's and don'ts. They're at ease. And they trust in the mountain of Samaria. They trust in somebody else, not living God, for their salvation, for their doctrines, for their righteousness, for the forgiveness of their sins, which are named the chief of the nations, whichever chief of the nations, that is Samaria at that time, to whom the house of Israel came. Pass you unto Calneh. Here again the Calneh is coming. So God is telling, I will bring you, or I will bring judgment. You will be driven unto Calneh. That's where the place of judgment and the place of their destruction, and that's where they end. Pass you unto Calneh and see. From thence you go to Hamath, eh, the great, then go down to Gath of the Philistines. Be they better than these kingdoms, or their border greater than your borders? But I will put you into the worst people's hands. And one of the worst peoples is Calneh. You that put far away the evil day and cause the seat of violence to come near. So they think that evil day will never come on them. The day of God, day of the Lord, the judgment would never touch us. That's how Israelites were thinking at that time. And they caused the seat of violence to come near, that lie upon the beds of ivory. Ivory is a kind of luxury, which is expensive in those days. The ivory beds is a figurative way of saying they're given over to the luxuries and comforts of this life and stretch themselves upon their couches and eat the lambs out of the flock and calves out of the midst of the stall, so their life very good going. that chant to the sounds of the viol, and they're using musical instruments, invent to themselves the instruments of music like David. So on the surface, everything seems to be good. They are abundantly blessed, but the judgment would come. But the judgment would come. So the judgment actually came on northern 10 tribes. They were actually carried over to Calneh. Now we will come to Calah. Calah is again very little, and we do little bit of interpretation. Calah is more a physical city and also is a figurative city. Just as Calah too has her mission among the cities that are being a place for the deportation of the church. So Calah is also like Calneh, the earlier city. The king of Assyria, Tilgath, yeah, Tiglath-Pileser took Israel captive to Assyria, and the place of captivity was Calah. So here the Calah mentioned in Second Kings 17:6, all these verses we will briefly touch upon. It has a different Strong's number, but may some Bible teachers believe it is the same city. If it is not literally same city, at least figuratively, it's the same city because there is a general movement of northern 10 tribes of Israel by Assyrian invaders towards the Shinar, towards the Assyria, Babylon, and beyond, towards Damascus. So figuratively it is true, but literally it is a little bit uh, not quite there, but it is an interpretative uh, uh, assertion. These are these accidental characteristics of the cities of secondary importance will reappear often in symbolic names, but we can already perceive the extraordinary declaration that the city is the great enemy of the church. So, this is an underlying theme. The God's faithful people are at odds with this city. The city is also the assembly. So the city is called grouping of people in a large number, assembly and gathering together, but is exactly the opposite of the church assembly. It is the place where church is held captive and is a prey for war and threats, a place where it is in combat not against flesh and blood, but against idols, against that spiritual power which is the essential characteristic of the city. So, city, as we discussed, has a physical layer, people like Nimrod and all his people, but there is also demonic spirits on top of that, moving and animating people. So, we as Christians are directly in war against those demonic spirits, and sometimes we are war against the physical people that demon spirits are moving. So it's all scriptural. And 2 Kings 17:6, it says, in the ninth year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria, took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah. Halah is believed to be same as Calah, Strong's 2477, Kalak, and in Habar by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of Medes. So God's people are carried out into this Babylonian city as Calah, if this interpretation is right. First Chronicles chapter 5 verse 26. These are all parallel verses, Kings and Chronicles. And God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, and spirit of Tilgath Pilneser. So here, king of Assyria, God is stirring up not only the kings, but the spirit of their kings. There's a duality here. The person, the king, has his human spirit. God might be stirring them up, or there are demon spirits operating and completely animating these kings. But God might stir up those demon spirits also because He's a sovereign God. Either way, it is true. And because of this stirring, he carried them away. That is, who? Israelites, even the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh, and brought them unto Calah, and Hebar and Hara into the river Gozan unto this day. Same parallel, Second Kings 18, verse 11. And the king of Assyria did carry away Israel unto Assyria and put them in Calah and in Hebar by the river Gozan and the cities of Medes. So these Babylonian cities are ruthless and cruel, but sometimes God's people end up there because they are displeasing their God. It's all according to what God said to Israelites in Deuteronomy 28, verse 64. And the Lord shall scatter you among all people from one end of the earth even unto the other, and there you shall serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, even wood and stone. So this is the punishment. This is the judgment of God. God has said even in Deuteronomy so early, and this is what we are seeing. That was all about the ancient Israel. How about us, the church? Do we have any danger that we can be taken captive into a Babylonian cities? Let's see. Let's listen to Jesus Christ. Revelation 13, verse 8. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, that is, the dragon and the beast. Here in the modern times, we have beast powers, and behind the beast, there is dragon. And if we are worshiping the beast, then we are toast. That's what God is saying. Let me read it again. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship the dragon beast, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. There is something significant is happening if you worship beast instead of God. Either your name is never written in the book of life, or it is written but blotted out by Jesus Christ. So now it is as if they are not written in the book of life, all because we are worshiping the beast. Now I have a question. Would your salvation be affected if you are negligent to identify the beast system and careful not to worship the beast? If you are negligent, you would end up in worshiping the beast, and your name would be blotted out of the book of life. And this is coming from straight from Jesus Christ, Lamb, book of Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. These are spiritual instructions. But if you are negligent and if your name is blotted out of the book of Lamb, then something else happens. The same thing that happened to ancient northern 10 tribes. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with sword. Some would be perished, some would be taken into captivity. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. The true saints have to be patient and faithful to their God. If you are not, then you would worship the beast. Because beast would be persecuting if you don't worship the beast. Beast has a second promoter of it, is called false prophet. The false prophet would come and persecute the saints because they are refusing to worship the beast. So this goes along the lines of what we discussed last time. God's people would be taken over to Babylon. This is a judgment decreed in the two visions that are shown to Zechariah in Zechariah chapter 5. First is the decree as a flying scroll. Then the basket in that woman is put there, which has put sealed, kind of covered by a uh, lead-based cap, and two women would come and carry her to Shinar. The whole sinful people would be carried out to Babylon. The Israelites who are sinning and leavened, and this basket is basket of grain, but that grain is leavened, and that they are taken to Babylon. Now, Jesus clearly warned us to be aware of leaven, beware of the spiritual leaven. If you are not putting this spiritual leaven from yourselves, a little of the leaven would leaven the whole lump, and the whole basket of bread or grain would go bad, would be fully leavened. And if you are a leavened Christian, you will be taken to Babylon. You will be taken to Calneh and Calah and Resen, the whole Shinar. You will end up in spiritual Babylon. Just to recap, what is spiritual leaven as defined by Jesus? Leaven is triple sandwich, according to him. First is doctrinal. My teachings is unleavened bread. If you eat any other teaching which is not from me, any man, any goofy man, his doctrines, if you take, that is doctrinal leavening. Second is behavioral, the the hypocrisy of Pharisees and the cunning manipulation of Herod are behavioral leavens which can be learned. That bad behaviors also would leaven you, and you will be a leavened Christian. And then the heart issues, the malice and wickedness, as Paul explains to us, those are also leaven. So the malice and wickedness, if we contract them or if we refuse to put out of our spiritual houses, then we are a leavened candidate. And I believe this woman is a leavened woman because the bread gone bad, and she's now carried out to Babylon, and we will be carried out to the prisons, and some of us would be killed. And worst thing is our names may be blotted out of the book of life of Lamb. So the warnings are much more serious for us, and the leavening is much more serious for us. It's no longer physical leaven that we focus on. We focus on spiritual leaven, the triple sandwich. Avoid it by all means, and we would be unleavened, truly unleavened before God, so that our names may be preserved in Jesus Christ's book of life, and we are part of true Israel, and the Babylonians would not come and invade and take us away. So that's where we go with the Nimrod's cities. And next presentation, I will uh, start with Babel, and then Babylon, and then Nineveh. And that would complete the Shinar, Nimrod's cities. And then perhaps I would cover Sodom and Gomorrah, uh, other cities that are very similar to Babylonian cities. Uh, Maybe or may not be. We will see how it goes. But definitely Babel, the next city, which Nimrod is supposedly have built, either the man Nimrod or the demon spirits of Nimrod. They built this city called Babel, and then Babylon, and then we will go to Nineveh. That's the road map. So with that, I will end the presentation. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time and your attention. Now we will open the room for your discussions, feedback, insight. Yes, Chris, go ahead, please.
Yeah, good evening, and thank you very much for this segment of the study series. Appreciate the time. And it's always interesting to parse through, history like this and overlay, the spiritual implications and what we can learn from it. I'm I'm always amazed at the story of Abraham when he rescues Lot. And in light of what you said tonight about the land of Shinar being full of, thieves and tyrants, and warlords who basically just took advantage of, the weaker people, most likely the nomads, who were, agriculturally based, and stole all their resources. And that story of Abraham rescuing Lot always stands out to me. And I was thinking about that a little earlier as you were talking about the prevalence of people, you know, you know, warring with the weaker tribes or the weaker, people out in the countryside who didn't have protection of walls and horses, etc. And it's interesting to note that when Abram heard that the four kings had taken captives of, Sodom and Gomorrah and those smaller cities on the plain along with Lot and all of his belongings, Abraham, or it was Abram at that time, he basically said, buddies, because he was camped in Mamre with a bunch of his friends, and he said, I am going to take armed men and follow them. And he had 318 armed and trained men born in his household. Now, you think about that. That's a good number. 318 is a good number, but that that basically says that he was prepared, that this was a prevalent practice, and he was ready to draw down on somebody who was misbehaving. And so they didn't prepare; they were already prepared. They basically marched after them and caught up with them and took back everything that they had taken, which tells me that this was prevalent and that he was very well prepared for that kind of thing. Kind of like, a powerful, leader in the land who basically is benevolent, but when something like this happens, he's going to school the rebels. So anyway, I always thought that story was poignant, and it certainly underscores what you were saying about the land of Shinar being, evil completely. And so he was ready for it. Now, the interesting alignment there is, Abraham becomes the father of many nations. And I'm sure there are some other parallels that will come to mind. But anyway, thank you very much for this evening.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, reminding of the story of Abraham rescuing Lot. That's a good reference. Appreciate that. Let's go to Marlene.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. There's a lot to take in there. And Chris's comment about, God, Abraham being ready. And it's like, God prepares and he does things. He tells people before things happen. And it's kind of how I feel tonight. You're warning us and telling us, be prepared. We've got spiritual things going on and pay attention and see all those things. I was thinking when you were talking about the cities that were built compared to when you're out in the country and you need to depend on God for things compared to having a city and you've got walls and you've got this and you don't rely on God as much because you've got your physical things around you. And I was thinking about farmers with all the technology, how things have changed. Growing up on the farm, we didn't have the irrigation systems. You prayed for rain. You knew you needed God to send the rain to have crops to produce, the sunshine, the good weather. And today you've got irrigation systems. So we don't have to pray to God for rain. You just turn on your irrigation system and you're good to go. So again, the technology takes you further away from God and relying on God to do those things. You see, we just get further away from God by our technology, and we forget God because of that.
Thanks, Marlene, and Chris as well, reminding us that to be ready, like Abraham, is ready for the eventuality. That's a very good point. Second point you mentioned, Marlene, technology seems to move us away from dependence on God. But I believe that's an elusive uh, independence. It's not real independence. You are still dependent on God as much as you were before. Even those who dwell in city, they think it's an illusion that they are not dependent on God, but they are dependent because if all the villages around them go into a drought, pretty soon they run out of food and they would be reminded that they are dependent on God. So it's an elusive thing. Uh, the whole city, the way physical cities are constructed, and the civilization thinking and mindset is planted in its inhabitants, that goes in a direction uh, where it numbs you from needing God every day. So you don't need much uh, need for prayer, studying God's word. Uh, all those things are shielded. Like, look at the cities, major cities. Uh, it's never popular. It's never really, God is not the center in a city. Uh, I mean, the countryside are also progressively going bad, but the cities are worse. Yes, Chris, go ahead, please.
Yeah, as you were going through it, it reminded me of an illustration that Jesus Christ made, and we find that in John 10, and starts in verse 8. John 10, verse 8, it says, "All who came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them." It says in verse 9, "I am the gate. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy," which seems to me the earmark or the litmus test of those who are, not of Christ. And it says, "I have come that they may have life and have it in all its fullness." And again, would be another, in my opinion, litmus test of the people who are either, of Christ or who are not. And we were talking about being prepared, and we were talking about, knowing and being ready to defend against those things that are, of Antichrist, Babylon. And these are, I guess, some elements that he gives us to understand it. It says in verse 11, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd, and the sheep are not his own." When he sees the wolf coming, and that could be, an army coming to invade your camp and take everything you want or whatever. This is just referring to a predator. When he sees the predator coming, he abandons the sheep and he runs away. Then the wolf pounces on them and scatters the flock. The man runs away because he is a hired servant and is unconcerned for the sheep. But again, Christ says in verse 14, "I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me." So I'm comforted by that. The fact that he'll go out of his way to protect us, even if we are, in a place where thieves and robbers can break through, or a shepherd who is supposed to be watching the flock abandons the flock as a result of it just isn't worth it, then you can tell there's no ownership there and not of Christ. So there's a bunch of things here that are good indicators and litmus tests with regard to motives of, people who claim to be leaders and shepherds. Anyway, what you were saying tonight kind of reminded me of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Very good reference. Appreciate much. Thieves and robbers reminds me of Shinar and Nimrod. They're out there, thievery and uh, plundering. It's the language of Babylon, Nimrod and Shinar, and very appropriate uh, whether you are in him or not in him. It's actually double binding. He knows us and we know him. He is in us and we are in him. It's a strong double binding exclusively with him, nobody else. So that also is a litmus test, very important word that you used. Uh, Love it. Like all of us from time to time should have that litmus test. Are we in him and his teachings are in us? Uh, and going back to 11, any foreign teaching is now 11. So that leavens the whole lump. So extremely careful not to embrace any foreign teaching from any man or any demon spirit. So I can't I can't shout enough and repeat enough that Jesus Christ and his words, they are the deciding factors for our salvation. Uh, let's go to Marlene.
When you were talking about the city Resen, defining that it's bridle and bit, I thought of a horse where you've got the bridle and the bit, and that controls the head of the horse, which controls the whole body. So you've got control here. So I was thinking this city has got some control over the other cities. And you brought that out saying, it represents a human power glorified in her. So I thought that was interesting how the analogy is there with the bridle and the bit and the control that goes with it.
I think that's excellent. It's control. Bridle and bit. You control the horse, you control the whole beast, and you control the whole population, perhaps, if you extend the analogies. Uh, Rightly said, Marlene. See, this is what happens when God's people listen to the same passages in Bible. God gives unique insight. Thank you for sharing that with us. Do you see any parallels between Shinar and today's world? I see a lot more, actually. When we come to 17 and 18 of Revelation, uh, that has, I think that's a just accurate description of the current geopolitical world reality that we live in now. We are much more closer to the second coming and much more darker times. Confusion and anarchy is very much there. There's confusion. Yes, Chris.
Well, I think it's obvious that if you ask anybody from our generation what they were seeing is prevalent in the more recent generations, it would be, people are a lot more narcissistic. They're selfish. They're distracted. They are eager to do things that seem aberrant. And I'm thinking about the escalation of abortion as one of them. Your mindset or the mindset of the culture has to be such that it would equal, what must have been the case in the land of Shinar and specifically Sodom and Gomorrah. That was so wicked and so evil, God had to destroy it. And we're not talking about sexual sins. We are talking about despicable barbarism and just, brutality at a level that it must have just made him sick. And this is what was going on. It wasn't necessarily anything else related to sex or anything like that. I think it was much more what we're seeing now is the love of many waxing cold. And there's no love or respect for parents anymore. There's no love or respect for any of our institutions that gave us stability and unity and the ability to build things, and certainly anything related to a church, mostly Christianity churches, is just a sheer hatred, almost like exhibited by the Jews when they hated Christ. This is what I think is becoming more prevalent, and that is definitely different from the era of my parents, my grandparents, and my generation. So, you asked the question, do I see any continuity or any alignment? I certainly do.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I mean, even the abortion and spirit of murder is so powerful, it touches and moves. Even the movies, the violence and the spirit of murder manifests so much. And also, you said like you touched upon the sexual perversity. Uh, that's even more intense, I believe. The demon spirits are completely swaying away the whole land, whole world. Everybody is just saturated and moved and bombarded with these perversions of sex. And it's so abnormal. The intensity is so alarming, and Christians are caught in these waves of tsunamis of sexual perversity. You don't need to go anywhere. You just sit, close your doors, windows, sit in your home, still you are bombarded. This is supernatural. I think the warfare and the dark times are really, really bad. Uh, Having lived more than 60 years on the earth, I myself see from when I was young to now, there is a tremendous multiplication of the spirits of darkness moving everybody. They want to unleash floods of sin and sexual perversity and the violence, murder, and spirit of lying and cover up. And I think we are attacked on multiple fronts in a much intense way, both through media and outside the media, as Satan is called Prince of the Power of the Air. Somewhere, somehow, the bombardment is monstrous, of monstrous proportions now. Uh, I don't know if it is personally I am sensing it or everybody is sensing it. It's, I don't know. Like, I think we should talk more about such things, the intensification of every evil thing, demonic. And thanks, Rita, for putting that the definitions are changed. The good is called evil, and evil is good. And God pronounces a woe unto them who calls sweet bitter and bitter sweet, good evil and evil good. It's a woe unto them. So that's another kind of twisting the things. The enormous misinformation and twisting in the media around us, the number of influencers from various camps, they are funded by various powers, and their sole job is to twist the facts, to call good evil and evil good, to cover up. And a good innocent person or innocent act now is completely twisted and presented it as an evil act with evil intentions. We have reached a state in the history of the world, history of mankind. The evil versus evil good and good evil is has reached its colossal heights. I mean, nowhere this much fabrication and twisting of facts. And we no longer be able to believe who is telling the truth, what is truth. The amount of PR and amount of massive disinformation and misinformation everywhere, and the influencers. You have a new class of employment opportunities. You can be an influencer and lie to the people and misdirect them to believe something. They're all over the places and all over the social media, and they have completely different agendas, not necessarily political or religious. Sometimes they're commercial. People have done research like the influencers talk about a health issue, a specific health issue nobody has seen. They keep talking and they think that they present as if some research somebody did and these things are coming. So after couple of years, maybe 5 years, you see products coming into the market uh, to help or mitigate this this medical issue that influencers are already propagating and making people aware of. So they're not, it's all fake. There's no research. They are being paid by these companies and they are creating a market for these companies. And then after a few years, they come up with this goofy product which supposedly resolve a goofy uh, health condition that is just a figment of imagination created by these influencers. See the massive amounts of lying and distortion of facts just for wealth, just to get your money. Uh, it's all aspects of life. I think we are reaching a frightening uh, spiritual state. Thanks, Rita, by the way.